Since it came out in 1941, Citizen Kane has often been called the greatest movie ever made. If you watched it today without any context, it might be hard to understand why. But it combined so many different filmmaking techniques that it became a reference point for all film history that came after it. And that's especially true when we look at it through the lens of our movie club theme, editing is story. The movie has an unusual structure where we're constantly jumping through time, condensing time, and trying to link up separate plot lines into one cohesive story. How does the editing help do this? We're talking all about it this week in Caden's Movie Club. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it, beat it. Hollywood movies started using digital editing systems in the early 90s, and they only became standard in the early 2000s. Pretty much everything before that was edited with actual film, which was quite a bit more complicated. Editors generally tried to be very efficient and calculated when they started literally cutting the film, because making additional copies was expensive and ran the risk of damaging the original film. By the early 1930s, there was an editing device that became standard in filmmaking. It was called the moviola.
Many a potential star is finished on the cutting room floor. This film editor is working on the moviola.
And it allowed editors to actually view the film while they were editing it. They would then cut the film in a splicer and tape or glue it to other pieces of film. So for a long time, movies had a very handmade quality to them, and this would have been how Citizen Kane was made. Orson Welles directed and starred in the movie at the age of 25. He basically took a huge range of inspirations, styles, and techniques and combined them all into one movie. And that story starts with our main character's death. He says one final word, and passes away. We then transition into a newsreel about his life that pretty much tells us the whole story before we see it. Why would a story want to reveal so much before it even really starts? The opening scene is a bunch of slow, dark shots of Xanadu, which is Kane's estate. And all of the transitions between shots are not cuts, they're long dissolves. It helps set the tone that this place is dreary and deteriorating. And to get a dissolve transition when editing on film, they had to use a tool called an optical printer, which could essentially play back and record material at the same time. So they would play 2 reels of film at once and then project that composite image onto a film negative. And now we can just drag and drop effects right onto digital clips, like this. Wow, look at that dissolve. We then go into Xanadu, and the way Kane's death is portrayed is really artistic and dramatic. We have the snow globe that looks like a new scene until it pulls out to show it's in his hand. Then the extreme close-up of him whispering Rosebud. Then the snow globe shattering. And we see the nurse come in through the reflection of the snow globe. Then the light fades from the window as light just faded from Kane. And then we have a hard cut directly into this newsreel.
News on the march!
But it's an intentionally jarring transition. We go from all this shadow and mystery to getting spoon-fed information by a narrator. It breezes through Kane's whole life in a few minutes. But once the newsreel ends, it reveals we were actually watching it alongside the news team, and there's one big flaw. The reel gave us what Kane did in his life, but it wasn't really able to explain why. And that's illustrated through the point that nobody knows what Rosebud means. So a reporter is sent to investigate, and we as an audience take on that role. That's why the reporter is silhouetted for most of the movie. He's not really a character, he's a stand-in for us. But with that huge distinction between the editing styles of the opening scene and the newsreel, the movie sets up this idea that the why behind a man like Kane is important. Thompson, the journalist, goes to interview different people who knew Kane. The way the story is structured, we hear the interviewee's entire story before we move on to the next one. Since these people knew Kane throughout many years of his life, that means the movie is constantly jumping through time. And through that process, the movie uses just about every editing technique that was available at the time. We already talked a little bit about dissolves, but the movie takes advantage of those so that when it does choose to use hard cuts, they really stand out.
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas.
And a Happy New Year!
But this cut is even more significant than we may realize at first. When Kane was a child, he lived with his parents. His mother ran a boarding house, and when one of her tenants couldn't pay her, they gave her the deed to a mine that was thought to be worthless. But when gold was discovered, Mrs. Kane suddenly became incredibly rich. She hired Thatcher and his bank to not only manage her wealth, but to look after her son, Charles. She did this to get him away from his abusive father, but also because she felt that if Charles was raised by a wealthy banker, he could learn from the people who would raise him to understand how to use his new fortune wisely. When Charles finds out about this, he's playing with his sled outside.
Be careful, Charles.
Kane.
Pull your muffler around your neck, Charles.
Kane, I think we shall have to tell him now.
He doesn't want to go and live with Thatcher, but he's forced to, and we get these dissolving shots of the sled getting buried in snow. Then at Christmas, Thatcher is gifting Charles a new sled. So Charles's childhood has just been replaced, and then we have that hard cut to years later when Charles Kane is now 25 and about to inherit all of the assets the bank has managed for him. But instead, he tells Thatcher in a letter that he's not interested in any of those assets except one.
One item on your list intrigues me, the New York Inquirer. Please don't sell it. I'm coming back to America to take charge. I think it would be fun to run a newspaper. I think it would be fun to run a newspaper.
And from there, we jump directly into one of the other editing techniques this movie uses often and is famous for, a montage.
Traction trust exposed. Traction trust please puffed by. Traction trust smashed by Inquirer. Robert Baggers. Galleons of Spain off Jersey coast. Is that really your idea of how to run a newspaper?
I don't know how to run a newspaper, Mr. Thatcher. I just try everything I can think of.
This is our first introduction to the adult version of Kane, and we quickly learn that he's decided to reject everything he was brought up to be. He's using his newspaper to attack the man and the systems that raised him. The montage uses dissolves, but notice how much quicker they are here than they are in the opening scene. They almost function like cuts, but they still give the feeling of the passage of time. As we continue hearing about perspectives of Kane throughout the story, we know that he changed over time. And this is best illustrated in the scene that depicts the decline of Kane's first marriage with Emily. This scene takes place over years at a time, but happens all in one single location. This scene achieves two things at once. It shows how Kane and Emily grew apart, which is represented literally by them being further apart.
I absolutely adore you.
But because their disagreements are always about Kane's paper, we realize that it's the Inquirer that Kane is really married to. And this montage utilizes both cuts, dissolves, and whip pan transitions to communicate everything that's going on.
He happens to be the president, Charles, not you.
That's a mistake that will be corrected one of these days.
Your Mr. Bernstein sent Junior the most incredible atrocity yesterday, Charles.
Mr. Bernstein is apt to pay a visit to the nursery now and then.
Does he have to?
Yes.
Really, Charles? People will think...
What I tell them to think.
Within the scene, a cut tells us the dialogue is all happening at the same time. But then the whip pan, combined with a dissolve, is what signals that time has rapidly flown by, even though we're still here in the exact same spot. But personally, I think the most effective and impressive use of editing is the opera montage. At this point in the story, Kane has left his first wife to marry a much younger woman, Susan. The scandal ruined his political career, and now he's spent insane amounts of money to establish her as a professional singer. He's built her an opera house, he's bought lessons from the top professionals, and he has his newspapers writing about her constantly. And the real irony is that Susan doesn't even want to be a singer anymore. She's humiliated because everyone thinks she's terrible and knows that Kane is forcing this to happen. But it's not about Susan or the public, it's about Kane's pride. The visuals of this montage are so impressive for the time. We basically have two montages going on at once through the use of transparent overlays. Those layers all happening at the same time give the sequence a chaotic tone. It's like we can feel Kane pushing his power and pride to the limits of sanity. But one aspect of the editing that's very important is the sound editing. The thing that really makes this montage stand out to me is the way multiple tracks of Susan's singing are layered in with the bashing cymbals of the orchestra. It makes the sequence not just chaotic, but haunting. Like these acts of vanity are leading to a bigger downfall, which they are for both Kane and Susan. The marriage ends in an even more chaotic way than Kane's first marriage did. The only thing filling the mansion by the time Kane dies is his endless collection of things he acquired over the years. As we come to the end of the movie, the journalist has failed to discover what Rosebud meant, but it's been there in front of him the entire time.
I don't think any word can explain a man's life. No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle. A missing piece.
Throw that junk.
Rosebud is revealed to be the name of Kane's childhood sled, the one he was forced to leave behind. As Kane's estate works to evaluate his massive inventory, the most important thing out of the whole collection is this sled, but to them, it's an old piece of junk and they toss it into the furnace. When his mother made the decision to send him away in the hope it would benefit him, she took away the one thing he really needed, which was to be loved. An entire childhood and upbringing were ripped away from him in an instant and replaced with a life obsessed with money and the power it brings. At any point along the story, no matter how much Kane tried to pose as a man of the people, he was only ever seeking to be loved, whether that was by his colleagues at the paper, the women in his life, or the readers of his paper. But at the end of the day, those people were nothing more than things he collected, just like all of his statues and his mansion. Because when his childhood was taken away, he didn't just lose love, he never never learned how to love. He only ever learned how to manipulate systems, which is what he did his entire life. And that concept is best illustrated through the way the film weaves together different stories and perspectives that all highlight the flaws of Charles Kane with completely different editing techniques. All aspects of filmmaking are incredibly important to bring movies to life, but editing is the thing that truly separates cinema from other art forms. The way movies can stitch and smash together a series of images in a way that translates to meaning in our brain is a language in and of itself. In Chicago, we saw how editing communicated the existence of two different realities and then brought them back together to make a statement about the world's obsession with being entertained. In Hoop Dreams, we saw how massive amounts of raw footage could be organized into two parallel stories that highlighted a broken system. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, we saw how editing strengthens visual storytelling so that even simple plot lines can be some of the most engaging cinematic experiences. And with Citizen Kane, we saw how multiple innovative technical editing styles were all used to effectively tell one cohesive story. Editing is often the unsung hero of movies, but hopefully after this month we can be more aware and appreciative of just how much it contributes to our most popular form of storytelling. And that wraps up our April Movie Club. Tomorrow I'll be announcing the theme and lineup for May, so stay tuned. And if you want to stay in the know about Movie Club, you know where to go.